Welcome to Harmonious Clan's live parenting coaching replay. We do our live coaching every Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific, 11:30 a.m. Central, and 12:30 p.m. Eastern on Facebook Live. Louisa will answer your questions, help you walk through your struggles, and provide you with strategies you can apply now to bring out the gem that is your child from that diamond in the rough.
Hi, good morning. I'm Louisa Kasha. I engineer outside-the-box solution for outside-the-box children. And who are these children? Anybody that doesn't quite fit into a cookie cutter solution. Some of the times these children have special diagnoses, and other times they don't have any diagnoses. It's just that a typical solution doesn't quite work for them, and they need a little something different. Something a little different. So I'm here every Friday to share my strategies with you on how we create different solutions that are more outside the box, that works more effectively for children that don't necessarily fit into a cookie cutter. Today I'm going to share with you about consequences and behaviors and how do we fix the behaviors. I want to especially talk to you about this is going to be a series on the behavior ABCs. I'm going to introduce you to what comes before and after behaviors and how do we modify the behaviors more effectively than what we are already doing. So a lot of times here, behavior consequences, and I really want to talk about the antecedents. Okay, I really want to talk about the antecedents. So many times I get a lot of questions from parents asking about how do I make a consequence that really is going to work, because this is my punishment, and every time she does this, he does this, and then I do that, and it doesn't seem like the children really care. It doesn't seem like it's working because they're getting out of their consequence anyways, or the consequence isn't really working. So before we tap into the consequence, I really would like to talk about what's happening before the behavior even happens, because that is a place where you can actually modify the behavior far more effectively than at the tail end of it. Consequence is very, very important. It's an equal part of the solution, but I typically don't come to that point before addressing the antecedents. Antecedents basically means what's happening prior to the behavior. Everything that's happening internally to the child, your interaction with the child, as well as the child's environment. Everything that's going on prior to the happening of the behavior is what I want to focus on today in our series about the behavior modification. And why do I want to do that? Because that is a place where behavior didn't happen yet, as in the child didn't hit somebody, the child didn't didn't misbehave or didn't melt down yet. The child didn't have a problem yet. The child didn't have an issue yet. The child didn't exhibit terrible behavior yet. That actually is the most powerful that we have to be making behavioral modifications. Yes, I am saying that we're going to modify the behavior before the behavior happens. If that sounds strange to you, how can I modify it? Well, preemptively. There's a lot we can do before this. And why do you want to focus on the antecedent, which is right before behavior happens? So behavior, right? Whatever it be, screaming, hitting or tearing papers, or being disobey or disrespect, whatever the behavior may be happening right here. And this is before we have the behavior, we have the consequence. Okay, so again, I want to emphasize the work on a behavior that we don't like. For example, your child is always, I don't know, biting, or your child is, if a child is always not cleaning when he's supposed to, or if a child is always wasting his time when he's supposed to be doing his work. Before we get into the consequence, we need to get into the antecedent first. We need to program, and we need to create an environment, create a state of mind for the child, create a pattern of interaction that maximizes our success in the child behaving in the way that we expect them to. And antecedent is the state where we do that the most effectively. Why? Why do we not want to focus on the consequence? You know, the consequence meaning if he gets a punishment for doing this, he won't do that again. I mean, that's a good thought, and there's a lot of value in that. That definitely happens. But before we get there, we want to go into the antecedents before the behavior happens, because that is where we can be the most influential. And it sets up the child for success, and then it also does not lower their self-esteem by if they end up constantly receiving that consequence, constantly receiving either the reprimand or the consequence or punishment. They're going to begin to feel like they can't do it, and they're kind of getting to a hole. You know how sometimes you get into a hole where you just can't catch up with yourself? Is how they're going to feel. And so we don't want them feeling that way, and that's why I want to front load everything and pat everything to the front in the antecedent. Now, the second reason why I want to do that is because you will have a much higher chance at succeeding, leading your child into the desirable behavior when you work on the front loading rather than the back end of the consequence. The back end of the consequence we will definitely get into, and it's definitely necessary. But prior to getting to that, we need to make sure we're front loading everything. So that's why we want to work on antecedents. Now, why do we, now let's talk about more into the antecedents. How do we get into the antecedents of the behavior? For example, if a child is disobeying, if a child is hitting on the playground, for example, which is a pretty common thing that I'm hearing. You know, a child gets into a conflict with another child on the playground or in recess, and they just can't seem to get detangled from that situation. When we talk about the antecedent, there's so much we can do. And the number one thing is we're going to front load on the teaching. We need to front load on the teaching. Okay, prior to the behavior happening is where we have the most power to teach what is expected. Okay, so just to take an example, if a child doesn't really greet very well or isn't really friendly, isn't quite good with the whole social aspect of it, of greeting people at the parties or greeting visitors, or just take that one little slice of example on the greeting. Okay, so before the guest shows up, before the visitor shows up, we can go through many ways to teach the child. The number one way I like to teach is actually by using a storybook. So what you do is you write down, you start sketching. If you're not sketching to your child, no matter how old your child is, I mean, even 16, 17, I sketch for the children. I sketch for them on what's happening, you know, so I make a storyboard. I make a story with pages. So I used to do this on PowerPoint, and then I got, really fancy, I don't know, laminating, and then bind it into a little booklet. Well, now, you know what? Even your table conversation napkin will work, okay? You just got to get down and start sketching to your child about what's happening, what the expected behaviors are. So take the example of a child who's not really greeting, who's not really good at that. You talk to them about how it is important to greet people when you see them, and because it makes them feel welcome and gives them a warm feeling. And you also reciprocate that to the child. How do you feel if somebody sees you and doesn't greet you? Would you feel that they're ignoring you? Would you feel being left out? right? You reciprocate that to the child to put them into the situation on the receiving end of the behavior and say, and see how they feel. And once they can feel it on the other side of the table, they can come back to their side and say, so that's why it's important that we greet people. And then you go into the teaching of how we greet. We look people in the eye. At this point, I would sketch the eyes. I would sketch how we greet. We look people in the eyes. You take your hand out. If it's an adult, you shake your hand, right? Maybe you shake your hands, or you, I don't know, high five. I mean, whatever it is that you want your child to do, hug, shake hand, high five, or just look in the eye, and however you want your child to address. So it's easier if you can script it for the child. First, you say hi, Mr. or Mrs. something, and how are you? For example, I mean, just to make it really simple. And the idea here is you want to give your child a process for how to do this, and you want to break it down to a really simple way so your child can execute. So in your drawing, you're going to have eyes, meaning eyes looking, and you may write something really simple, eyes looking. The next one, number 2, is address their name, Mr., Mrs. something. And then the next one, you may say either hug or shake hand, or I don't know, nothing else, or how are you? Nice to see you, whatever you want the child to say. Okay, so then you go over this with them ahead of time, right? So after you include the actual procedure for how to do this task that you're expecting them to do, then in the end, you say, when I greet people cheerfully, people are happy and I'm happy. So some kind of an ending that makes that gives a good feeling. It's basically a good consequence and a good result of their expected behavior. So now that becomes a little sketch or a little book or a little storyline, whatever you want to call it. And you should work with them on that. You would read it to them a few times a day, and it's not a punishment, but it's all a part of setting the child up for success. You teach them, this is what's going to happen. So-and-so is going to come. I don't know, our uncle is going to come, and this is what we're going to do, right? That gets the child into that mode. Another thing you can do in the antecedent is role play. You can role play, you can rehearse. I mean, whatever the situation is, if it's about not handling a playground situation well, you will role play and rehearse, pretend like I'm another child and I just came in. So now we're going to practice saying, can I join you? Or would you like to join me? I mean, whatever it may be. And in the case of greeting, stick to our case study or our example of greeting. So then now you want to be rehearsing and practicing greeting with a child. Do you want to say, okay, so now you pretend to go to the door and you come up to the door and say, oh, hello. Hi, Kevin. And so then Kevin needs to do whatever it is go through whatever it is that you put into his little booklet on what the expected behaviors are. So not only are you teaching, you are rehearsing, practicing, and then you also give them a lot of success under their belts, because each time you practice, you are so cheerful about exactly what it is that they're doing, and you let them know each time that you practice, you reinforce. If you want to give them a reward at that time, go ahead. I mean, but the biggest reward comes from your energy. A child just really draws to your energy. If you can be so excited, you can be their cheerleader. That is going to be the biggest reward. However, each child is different, right? Each child is motivated by different things. So whatever it is, make sure you're delivering that to your child so they feel successful and they get the confidence under their belt and they feel good about what they're doing. Hey, this is a state where we're putting the child before we throw them into the situation where they are required to perform at whatever it is that we're asking them to do. In this case, before the uncle shows up, right? So that is the power of antecedent. And you can go into doing so many things in terms of making that to be a far more, making the choice that you want them to choose to be an easier choice. let me just give you an example. When you're waiting the grocery store or in the drugstore, I mean, whatever store it is that you're checking out of, you frequently see that they're displaying the candies, the gum, the magazines, and all those things are there. Why are they there? Because it's easy for you, right? So this is where it comes to the marketing. You got to know how to do your marketing with your child. And what is it that you're marketing? You are marketing the desirable behavior. You want your child to choose the expected and the desirable behavior rather than the misbehavior. So what you're doing, what you need to do is you need to market that. When you market that, not only do you tell people the benefits of why you should be buying this and how appealing it is to buy this, but you also want to make it easy for them. You want to make it much easier for them to make that choice rather than not. So for example, when you're checking out at the checkout register, why are those things there? Because you're there, you're waiting. It's so easy for you to just grab the magazine or grab the gum, grab the package of, I don't know, soda, drink, candy, gum, whatever it is. It's so easy for you to just grab it than it is for you to run back into the store, into the deep aisle of who knows what, and go get it. I mean, it's even hard for you to all of a sudden thinking, oh yeah, I need a drink, I need a soda. Oh yeah, I need this magazine. I mean, nobody thinks of it. It's just because it's there. It's convenient. So that's marketing. And you want to do that to your child too. You want to make the behavior that you want them to have an easy and a convenience choice compared to the other behavior, compared to the undesirable behavior. So that's another thing you can do in order to modify the behavior prior to it happening, which is what the marketers do, right? The purchasing behavior is what they want from you. But prior to your purchasing, they're padding the front end with all kinds of appeal, with all kinds of, they even make it convenient and easy for you to make that choice. So you want to make it convenient and easy to make for the child to make that choice. In addition to your teaching, to your rehearsing, you can set up the environment such that to make that choice is an easier one. Let's take the example of eating healthy. I mean, either yourself or your child wants to make a healthier, either you want yourself or you want your child to make a healthier choice, to eat healthier. Would it be easy to eat healthy and make the healthier choice and pick the fruits and the vegetables if you've got chips and other stuff, candy stocked up in the house? No, you have to get out of your way to drive to the store and to get it, and that's too much work. You're not. You're just going to grab whatever is around, right? So that makes it where if you want to modify the eating healthy behavior, you would just need to place healthy foods and make it easily accessible. For example, to the degree of having already cut up fruits in little cups in the fridge, where you open the fridge, oh, that's what you see. Cut up fruits in little cups, in little Tupperware, little containers. So you can go grab one, right? Nuts or, I mean, whatever you consider healthy and it is, you need to have it cut up, wash, prepare, package, and put in the fridge. So, or even put on your counter. So you're wandering around, you're hungry, you need a snack. Oh, it's right there. It's the thing that's in the counter. I'm going to grab it and eat it. So now you're making the choice to make a healthier choice, healthier food choice, a lot easier for yourself or your child. Same as any behavior it is that you want your child to do. Do something, craft the environment to make it a much easier choice to behave the way that's expected rather than unexpected. For example, to buy the candy, the marketers make it so easy for you. Grab it and you go. Okay, to eat healthy, to make a healthier choice, you make it easy for yourself. It's right there. It's on the counter. It's the first food that's available. So that's what you can do. There's a lot more that you can do in the antecedent states. I hope I've shared with you a few big ones that you can do. I mean, that is really that will get you 80% of the effect of of the pre-teaching and the front loading. With that, you have a much higher chance to get a successful behavior. I mean, so before the child even walks into the battle, you already have won it. Your child has already won it because they have already been front loaded with everything that sets them up for success. So that's the power of going into your antecedents. And now I want to take some time to address one of the questions that I received this week, which is from one of listeners about a child is sometimes act disrespectfully, sometimes talk disrespectfully, and when you try to give a consequence to the child, such as going to your room, the child keeps coming out a million times and seems to keep trying to get out of the consequence. Now, that fits directly into the topic that I'm talking about today, which is before we get into the consequence, because there are two aspects of it. You know, with the behavior, there's always two aspects. There's always the antecedents, which is everything that's happening before the behavior, before the child does what they do. And then the second aspect is everything that's happening after the behavior happens. Okay, so as an example, if you tell your child to clean, and then your child is throwing toys and they're not cleaning, let's break this into what's happening before the behavior and what's happening after the behavior. Well, what's happening before the behavior is that you told your child you're gonna, you need to go to dinner, you need to get dinner started, so clean up your toys. That's the antecedent. And then now, because you said that, now your child started throwing toys. So they could be trying to throw toys to get out of having to clean, right? And what's the consequence? If a typical consequence like that, as I hear from a lot of parents, a typical consequence, you go to timeout. Well, what are you doing with your consequence? Now, if the child goes to timeout, are they cleaning? No. So they have effectively gotten out of cleaning. So do you see how this works together between your antecedents, the behavior, and the consequence? So the consequence kind of controls what the child does, but the antecedent is what sets off what the child does. So if the child can get out of cleaning by throwing toys, that's going to reinforce them to throw toys every time you tell them to go eat, clean up and go eat, and they don't want to do that. So if they throw it, then they don't have to clean because now they're standing at timeout or sitting at timeout. Either way, they're getting out of the cleaning. So that's where the consequence comes in. Now, for your particular case, when the child is sometimes not being exactly respectful, and so you put a consequence on, and the consequence doesn't seem to be working because the child keeps getting out of the room, before we get into the consequence, I really want to get into the antecedent, as I've been talking today about it. You want to get into the drivers of the original behavior of not being disrespectful sometimes, or I mean, whatever behavior it is that brought the child to that consequence. I think we want to start from the root cause. Why is the child, if the behavior is the child not being disrespectful, why is the child not being disrespectful? What is the driver of that? And in that case, I can see some possibilities, just throwing it out there, some possibilities. It could be the peers. I mean, their environment, their daily interaction, the peers at school. That's just how people talk nowadays. You know, that's just how everybody talks. That's just how the kids talk. And so then that could be something that could be a driver of why it is that the child is being disrespectful, right? Another reason could have to do with the connection and the bond between you, the parent, and the child, because children are so extremely sensitive. And really, God, I believe God made them to draw our energy. They really made the children so that they are constantly drawing our energy, and they really crave the connection with us. So when we lose that connection, and children are so sensitive. I mean, they can sense it. If we're going on with our busy lives and we're doing this, we're going to work, we come home, we cook dinner, get them to sleep and all that. If we're going through the motions of our busy life, and then we don't realize that tiny special bond that we have between them, that tiny special connection we have with our children is lost, We may not realize it because we're so busy, but they sense it. They can sense that there is a connection that's lost. They can sense that they're alienated, or they not that you're trying to, but they can sense that there's something there, that the chemistry isn't quite there, And when that happens, it's pretty common and pretty typical that children will start being disrespectful to you. They will start acting out in different ways. And not that they can't speak, but that's just how they are. No matter the age, even if they're 10, 14, 17, they start acting out in other ways. And it's not even that they're intentionally doing it, but that's just the way they go about telling you that there's something wrong. So I see it this way, babies are always crying to tell you there's something wrong. You don't know what's wrong. Check the diapers. If they're hungry, do all kinds of things. Even on a 10-year-old or a 16-year-old, when something's wrong, you will know because they will start to exhibit some other behaviors. And that's kind of like the baby's crying. Now you got to go in and detect, so what's wrong? So what's going on? How are you feeling? So I think that's when you talk about how do I address antecedents in that case. Okay, you want to find out, are your peers all acting this way that's disrespectful? Or are you feeling some sort of a disconnect in our chemistry? Is something not going well? That's when you really want to have a heart-to-heart conversation with the child when you are at the antecedent state. Not after the behavior, before the behavior, before they're being disrespectful. You can come to a heart-to-heart talk on, hey, what's going on, lately? So your talk, you have to not be confrontational in a way that makes them defensive. You just say, you know what, it's been pretty troublesome to me that lately you've been, I don't know, whatever the specifics are. Maybe you've been ignoring me when I talk to you, or you haven't really responded to me very well, or whatever the specifics are, say it without offending them. So and then you talk about your feeling. That's making me feel kind of sad or kind of disappointed or kind of, whatever it is that your feeling is. You want to come with your child and be at the most honest state with them and say, what's going on? And you want to give them the benefit of your doubt in your discussion and say, I know that you don't really mean to do that. I know that you don't really mean to hurt my feelings. And I know that you're not a disrespectful person. I just wonder what's going on when you talk that way, right? And see what they have to say. But you first get onto their side. You let them know I'm on your side. You're not trying to reprimand them of that behavior, right? So that's one thing you could do. Another thing you can do is what I would be teaching about the front loading with the teaching. Many times we expect children to behave certain way without having taught them exactly what we're expecting and how to do that. So it could be as specific as, whatever it is that they're being disrespectful about, you will teach them very specifically. For example, I have children sometimes who's not being respectful to properties. They're not using certain things respectfully, and they're breaking them and damaging them. And I have to actually get down and really teach, okay, every time you use this is what you do with it. And again, none of this is a punishment. You want warm, fuzzy, good feelings about these conversations, warm, fuzzy, good feelings about your teaching, setting them up for success. And in the case of a 14-year-old who's not being respectful, you can, there's probably something going on with how they're feeling as it relates to you or the environment or whatever that may be going on in their life. And they're hormonal at that state too, right? So they're kind of moody. So you really want to work on being their friend and what's going on and help them trouble solve. And eventually, you come to a point and saying, oh yeah, I understand. Yeah, you know what? I will feel that way too. I would be pretty agitated if that was going on with me. And I can see why you're being really agitated. Well, you know what? The thing is, what the outsider who aren't inside of you, we perceive it as being pretty disrespectful, and it really hurts our feelings. And I want to talk about what we can do to help you so that you're not struggling with those issues. And as a result, you can be less agitated, you can be more respectful, and we can all, get along a little better. So that's kind of the angle where you want to go in terms of having that conversation with them. That's where you want to go with your antecedents. Once you find out what's troubling them, you really find ways to support them. So the whole idea there is you want to be so much more supportive than you are giving them consequences and punishments. There is definitely a place for consequences and punishments. Once you get through all of the antecedents, you've done everything you need to be doing in the antecedents, you should see the behavior improve by a lot. And whatever is left over that hasn't gotten improved, you will definitely tackle the consequences. I want to talk about consequences at our later episode, at another session, because that's a whole different ball game, just as antecedents is a totally different ball game. But I hope that gives you enough tips, something to start with, where you really want to find out the drivers of the behavior, whatever behavior it is that you are given a consequence to. Before you get to the consequence, let's look at what's happening before the behavior. What's causing the behavior? Because I'm pretty sure you want to give the consequence because you want to stop that behavior. Well, the easiest, the most powerful place to stop that behavior is at the root of it, which is the antecedent, before it even happens. And you will also even employ strategies to make it much easier for them to be respectful than it is for them to be disrespectful. And in terms of consequences, just stay tuned. We're going to talk about this right in the very next section next Friday. So if you have any questions about anything that I'm saying, please drop me an email. In my book, Outcast Outstanding, I also talk a lot more about these antecedents and consequences and how do you support all of this. But drop me an email or go to harmoniousclan.com and log in any questions that you would like for me to address on these Fridays. Again, my name is Louisa Kasha at Harmonious Clan, and I engineer outside the box solutions for outside the box children.